Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review LBJ, and this is the Rob Reiner directed film about Lyndon B. Johnson, starring Woody Harrelson. And I wasn't quite sure if this was going to be like biopic or what this was going to take care of, and it was a nonlinear story of him building up during the assassination of JFK and Lyndon B. Johnson becoming president and what he wound up doing with it. And it was an okay movie. It was fine. It was slightly above just completely average. And honestly, that was because of performances, but I'm going to get to that. I think Rob Reiner does a fine sentimental job of putting a film together. This definitely wasn't something like inspired like A Few Good Men or The Princess Bride. It's kind of, there it is. The storytelling, I'm not sure how I felt about the nonlinear storytelling in this film, and it's like also stops being nonlinear halfway through the film, and like what was the point? Where it's like building up to the assassination, cutting back to scenes of him as vice president and stuff like that, and then the assassination happens, and the whole rest of the film is just straight through, and it's just like, what was the point? I really didn't get it, but to each their own. It didn't really feel like an important storytelling technique that needed to be in this film, but that's what they chose to do. This film gets a little slow at parts, but overall I think it moves along pretty well, and I think that has to do with the energy of Woody Harrelson's performance, but we'll get to that. And tonally, it has some serious dramatic moments, but it also feels very like melodramatic in all of those moments. So it's kind of just like, it's very melodramatic. It doesn't feel like a really gritty drama. It feels kind of soapy. And then do I feel super connected? Like, do we really get a connection with JFK in this film? Feels so hard for him. You don't really get it. Basically just uses the fact that it's like, oh, everybody loved JFK and nobody liked Lyndon B. Johnson, and it used that historical setting to just try to sell that instead of actually building those relationships. So, but honestly, I thought that Lyndon B. Johnson wound up being a pretty sympathetic character in this film, which was very interesting, because honestly I didn't know much about him, which I think if you ask most people, they don't know much about Lyndon B. Johnson. But when you get the cinematography done by Barry Markowitz, it's so sheeny and obnoxious light everywhere, and it really, like, there's a lot of CGI in this film that felt really out of place and felt really artificial, and I'm not the hugest fan of how this film looks, and it does look like a TV movie, and it's just like, that's not a good thing if you're releasing this film wide, like, in theaters to a wide release, and it's just like, why? And they probably put a lot more money into this than a TV movie, and I don't think it really worked out in terms of like visual appeal for this film. And then you have writer Joey Hartston. Like I mentioned before, the story is intriguing and real. This man takes over the presidency, who's basically an afterthought, but one of the most popular presidents in the history of our country dies. What's he supposed to do with that? And I thought that's an intriguing story, and I don't know how well handled it wound up being presented, but I did think it was an intriguing story. But I also mentioned before, I wasn't the hugest fan of how the story was actually presented and structured. And then you have characters where it's like, JFK really doesn't get much. You actually get more from Bobby Kennedy, and Lady Bird Johnson's an afterthought. But I think Lyndon B. Johnson in this film was a very interesting character and a very sympathetic one, and he has a lot of dimensions to his character, and basically it's one central character that really gets it in this film. And you do get some moments with one of the senators played by Richard Jenkins, which I think their scenes, Harrelson and Jenkins scenes, are probably the most intriguing in this film, and then second to scenes with Lyndon B. Johnson and Bobby Kennedy. But overall, the dialogue feels really artificial at moments, and it's like, oh, I'm watching a movie, and feels really staged. and it's just like, okay, I get this. But then there's some like moments of like bad language and like dirty comments from LBJ, and it felt like, oh, that's probably him showing his real colors and being himself. And I thought those were the more interesting moments to watch him as a character. And then, is this movie super deep? No, it kind of skates along the top of the ice and talking about some like impactful historical events, and like it tries to deal with the race issues and civil rights, and it's like, okay, there's some moments where they do dig in a bit, but it's mostly like exposition of like somebody spelling out their feelings about it for everybody, and it's kind of like there's no subtlety about it, and it's fine. This movie is fine. And then we have composer Mark Shaman, and the music's really nice. It is, and it does stick out in the film, but overall it's just like, it feels like a very middle of the road kind of just effort, and you're looking at the big things that stick out in this film are the performances. I have to say though, the makeup's kind of awkward, and it's really weird seeing Woody Harrelson look the way he does, and even weirder to look at Jennifer Jason Leigh. She was really creepy, honestly, and I'm just like, probably should have got somebody that just looked a little bit more like her, or just didn't care about making her look exactly like her. Woody Harrelson does a fantastic job. I thought he was great in this film. I thought he brought tons of energy to every scene he was in. I thought he did fantastic. And Jennifer Jason Leigh, I thought, was really wasted. Like Lady Bird Johnson was like almost a non-factor in this film. She gets one scene to console her husband, and it's basically it. And then Richard Jenkins, I thought, really brought his game when he was on screen in the scenes that he had. The actor, who I forget his name, who played JFK, felt like he was doing an impression, and that was it just didn't feel right. But the actor who played Bobby Kennedy, despite the fact that he kept losing his Boston accent quite often throughout the film, Michael Stahl-David, I thought, did a really honest job, and I loved the scenes between him and Woody Harrelson in this film. And my final thoughts on this film is, it is indeed a TV movie effort enhanced by some very strong performances from some quality actors in this film. Would I tell people to go out in the theaters to go see this? No. If it's on TV and you like historical things, then go watch it. But overall, I'm just going to give LBJ a C+.